Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the chairman for his leadership on this issue and his very eloquently delivered speech on the seriousness of what's happening. The Syrian civil war is now in its 8th year, and it's approaching a very serious crossroads. While the media focus fades away after some chemical attack or a picture that steals our hearts for a moment, the war crimes being committed and the atrocities taking place in Syria are happening in full force right this very minute. For the last 9 days, the southern border of Syria has been under constant bombardment from airstrikes and barrel bomb attacks. Despite a ceasefire pact from Russia in July of 2017, we know Syria's main military ally has continued to carry out attacks on behalf of the Assad regime. This critical moment will affect the future of Syria, the security interests of the United States, and stability within the international community. So what are we going to do about it? Since World War I, we've held that chemical weapons have no place on the battlefield. We've held strong to this principle, and it's core to the values of our country. We know that the president of Syria, the brutal dictator Bashar al-Assad, and his ruthless regime have committed countless war crimes and bear responsibility for murdering more than 500,000 Syrians. We know Assad has used chemical weapons countless times to attack and murder innocent civilians. We know that Russia and Iranian regimes have supported and helped Assad in this genocide on the Syrian people, including airstrikes and attacks that account for more than 50,000 dead Syrian children. We've seen the Assad regime, along with his Iranian and Russian backers, starve the people in cities like Madaya, Aleppo, and eastern Ghouta by using food as a weapon. We know the Assad regime has often refused UN and other humanitarian organizations from delivering critical humanitarian assistance to the most ravaged cities in Syria. Because we know this, we cannot turn a blind eye. We cannot just sweep this under the rug and ignore the horrific reality in Syria right now. We cannot isolate ourselves from this crisis. What happens in Syria and what happens in the Middle East has a very real impact on our national security and the security of future generations. And if we fail to act in Syria and fail to inflict punishment over the use of chemical weapons, we will ultimately see the end of the Non-Proliferation Treaty of chemical weapons and open the world to ghastly horrors, perpetual insecurity, and extreme danger. I support the President's enforcement of those red lines, but we must not be naive enough to think that if we show weakness elsewhere, it will not happen again. To be clear, I am not suggesting that the United States invade Syria, put 100,000 troops in, and start a regional war, not in the slightest. What I am suggesting is that we take a stand for what's right, what is just, and what is in the best interest of the United States and the freedom-loving people around the world. We need a long-term strategy in Syria that leads to a solution of peace and an end to the ongoing, deadly, and horrific conflict. This strategy should also include the end of the Assad regime and a place at the table for all people at the table of government. First, we must maintain a presence in Syria, and we must uphold the de-escalation zones that have already been established. By bolstering these areas and making it known that the United States remains in the region, we can thwart the strongmen of Russia and Iran from pushing into these areas and targeting civilians. Internally, both Russia and Iran are fractured and tired. They both view Syria as a power grab opportunity to take on their enemies, the United States and Israel. It comes as no surprise as we know the true intentions of these bad actors anyway. That being said, we cannot allow Iran to complete its land bridge in the Middle East through Syria, and we cannot trust the Russians ever on anything. Russian strikes have obliterated residential areas in Syria, displacing thousands. The area's major hospitals and makeshift hospitals have been targeted and destroyed. Let me say that again. The region's hospitals have been targeted and destroyed. We must take measures to punish Russia and Iran for their crimes. Next, given the dire situation in places like Daraa, We need to establish no-fly zones and maintain a presence to ensure they're being enforced by us and our allies. This is vital for the safety of our coalition units, the humanitarian aid volunteers, and the Syrian civilians who have been forced to flee their homes and their communities. We need to hold Assad, his regime, and the Russian and Iranian supporters accountable. In April, I spoke on the House floor in support of a bill I introduced with my House Foreign Affairs colleagues, H.R. 4681, the No Assistance to Assad Act. This bill, which passed the House and now sits in the Senate, is a step in the right direction in taking actions in Syria and punishing the Assad regime for its horrific war crimes. H.R. 4681 needs to be implemented, as do the sanctions passed last year against the supporters of the Assad regime for their role in the genocide of Syrian civilians. Most importantly, the United States needs to remind people of Syria that we stand with them. We stand for freedom, and we stand against the inhumane crimes committed against them by this barbaric regime and their Russian and Iranian backers. If you're a 10-year-old kid in Syria and your dad was killed by an airstrike, you might see ISIS as the only opponent to Bashar al-Assad, the butcher of Damascus who brutalized your family and destroyed your home, who bombed your school and left you without an education or opportunity. If you're this 10-year-old kid in Syria right now, you're likely a rich target of ISIS recruitment. Sadly, the next generation of terrorism will likely stem from these regions that have no hope or opportunity, that feel completely abandoned and ignored by the international community. I spoke to a Syrian regime defector yesterday named Caesar. Caesar defected from the Assad regime and brought with him thousands of pictures and documents proving that the regime tortures, starves, and kills innocent people every day. And as if that isn't enough, they document these atrocities with a cold precision reminiscent of the actions of Nazi Germany. It's chilling. Caesar risked his life by sharing his experiences, and in our meetings, he selfishly focuses on others. He emphasized how gravely the people of Syria are suffering every single day. And every single day, the people of Syria cling to the hope that America will speak up and stand with them. I pray for peace. And I urge the administration to position the United States as the global leader that this world needs right now. I also implore the Senate to pass the Caesar Act, sanctioning regime officials involved in the torture and opening the path to their capture and trial as war criminals. They must be held accountable. We have passed this bill repeatedly, and we will do so again if we must, but the Senate has an opportunity to make this law and stand with the values that we hold dear. Mr. Speaker, the people of Syria need to know that there is hope. And right now, our lack of strategy in Syria is leaving many with little hope or faith in the United States or our allies. I believe America has a mission in this world, and it's to be an example of self-governance in a world drowning in strongmen, cruelty, and chaos. And I believe we have an opportunity to show the people of Syria and the world that the American dream continues. We are still that shining city on a hill and a beacon of hope for peace and prosperity. When that light dims, it doesn't give America an opportunity to look within and relax, regain ourselves, look coldly and detached at the rest of the world. History has shown again and again that a dimming light in American leadership only guarantees a future fight, a future calling up of a generation of Americans to once again defeat an enemy. But if we remember this God-given mission, and the light on the hill continues to beam bright, we can create a generation within the camps of our enemies that reject their ideology and implement change from within. Behind the Iron Curtain, it wasn't America's military action that sliced it in half. It was people behind it, seeing our light peering over the wall, tearing it down so they too could enjoy those freedoms. As the great President John F. Kennedy said, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and success of liberty." Bashar al-Assad will ultimately pay an awful eternal price when he meets his maker. Let's move that appointment up so that justice here or in the afterlife is swift and soon. Let's shine our light on the actions of Iran and Russia. Let's expose with that brightness the torture, the bombing of aid convoys and hospitals. Let's shine that light on the plight of people simply trying to live their lives, to raise their children to be police officers, doctors, farmers, factory workers, and mothers and fathers. Let's speak out for the freedom-loving people who so desperately need our voice.